Good morning. I'll convene this Tuesday, March 15, 2022 regular meeting of the Board of County Commissioners. Welcome. We are fully in attendance. Welcome. We are remote again today. Well, thank you for joining us. We'll begin today's agenda with the item 1, which is adjustments to the agenda. Mr. Mokrahayski, do you see any adjustments needed to the agenda?
Chair, we are requesting to add an executive session tomorrow morning, Wednesday morning. I believe Ms. Jones has noticed that or is in the process of noticing that for 9 a.m. tomorrow related to a real property discussion. And so I wanted to let the board know about that and confirm that 9 a.m. Tomorrow works for an executive session that we anticipate to be no more than 30 minutes.
Thank you, Steve, Mr. Mokrahayski. And then procedurally, shall I read us into that executive session before we adjourn today, or shall we will we convene in regular session first tomorrow?
That's a good question. I think Ms. Jones, I'm not sure if Mr. Dingle is on or Ms. Jones wants to answer that. I think you, go ahead.
I can answer that question. Chair Farr, yes, we will go ahead and on our afternoon meeting notice, we do have an executive session notice. You can read in then for, if possible, I would like to push it to 9:15, unfortunately, so I have the full 24 hours to get the notice out. And yes, I will send you the language and you can notice that beginning, that it will start at 9:15 tomorrow morning. You can notice that today, and we will begin an executive session tomorrow at 9:15.
Then the final item on today's agenda will be reading into tomorrow's executive session and then adjourn. Thank you for that adjustment to the agenda, Mr. Mokrahayski, Ms. Jones. Do we, to the board, any adjustments that you see or feel necessary? Then we'll move along to item 2, any emergency business. Mr. Mokrahayski.
We don't have emergency business today.
All right, then we'll move along to public comments. Ms. Jones, do we have people signed up for public comment?
One moment, Chair Farr. Let me check into our participants, and I believe we do. We do have people signed up for public comment. We have 6 people right now signed up.
Perfect, then I'll deliver my preamble. Speakers are going to be taken in the order they've signed up and limited to 3 minutes. I'm going to mention that there'll be no signal when 3 minutes is approaching. Please keep an eye, if you're a speaker, please keep an eye on the clock on your screen. And at 3 minutes, the mic will be silenced and we'll move along either to the next speaker or to the next agenda item. So be cognizant of the clock. We do have time certain executive session today, but I see no issue in limiting the number of speakers today. So we will have take the speakers in order. Be allowed 3 minutes. Ms. Jones, can you call the speakers in order?
Thank you, Chair Farr. At this time, if you have signed up for public comment, if you would raise your virtual hand now, I will begin calling on you as your hands are raised. Right now, I show our first speaker will be Dylan Plummer, followed by Ann Nealand. Dylan, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment.
Great, can you hear me?
Affirmative.
Chair Farr and County Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to testify this morning. My name is Dylan Plummer and I'm the Senior Campaign Representative with the Sierra Club working on building electrification in Oregon and Washington. I also currently reside in District 3 of Blaine County. I'm here to voice the Sierra Club's concerns about recent revisions to the county's draft climate action plan, specifically the removal of critical actions, including ACA2, NGS1, NGS2, and NGC1. And I'll send this comment so you all can track those. And general revisions to replace explicit references to electrification with broader industry-friendly language like, quote, decarbonization. The Sierra Club requests that the following changes are made in order for our organization to support the passage of the plan this spring. 1, replace the above referenced actions which were removed from the previous draft document. On action ACA1, add, quote, or funded before, quote, building projects, unquote, to require no gas in new county funded buildings. On ACC1, substitute, quote, electrification of existing systems at end of useful life, unquote, for, quote, increasing the efficiency of current systems, unquote, in order to make explicit intentions to transition these systems off of fossil fuels. The Sierra Club looks forward to supporting a climate action plan that emphasizes the need for comprehensive electrification in order to reduce emissions and protect public health. a plan that commits the county to build all new publicly funded buildings solely with electric appliances. And that highlights the county's support for cities like Eugene taking action at the municipal level to ensure that new construction is 100% electric. Lane County has the opportunity to join with over 50 cities and counties across the country, including New York City and San Francisco, that have begun the process to transition from gas to a more renewable and equitable future, and to lead our state toward a necessary clean energy transition to electricity. The Pacific Northwest, Seattle, Shoreline, and Olympia have already started the transition off methane gas. And as you all know, the city of Eugene and Multnomah County are leading the way within Oregon. In order to reduce emissions, protect public health and safety, and advance a platform of climate justice, Lane County will need to work to stop the expansion of methane gas infrastructure and begin a managed transition off of fossil fuels altogether. I urge the county pass a plan that incorporates our suggested revisions and includes commitments to mandate county-owned buildings be constructed 100% electric, and to explicitly support cities like Eugene to take actions that construct and prioritize all electric buildings as quickly as possible. I also want to emphasize the need for the county to explore more aggressive actions that can be taken in the future to support equitable and comprehensive electrification across this jurisdiction. Thank you so much for your leadership and for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Plummer.
Thank you for your public comment. Our next speaker will be Ann Nealand, followed by Peter Mead. Ann, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment. Ann, I show yourself muted. There you go. There you go.
Great. Good morning. I'm Ann Nealand. As our community and state appear to be stepping back from the more intrusive aspects of the COVID narrative, specifically masking and vaccination clinics, I have two separate items to bring to your attention. First, at your March 1st board meeting, Steve Adams revealed how painfully out of touch Lane County Public Health is when he said that because the mask mandates are being rolled back in Oregon, people have to be more vigilant about getting vaccinated, which is LCPH's #1 strategy. I'd like to remind this board, Mr. Adams and others of LCPH, that in January 2022, the CDC's Rochelle Walensky and Anthony Fauci admitted that the vaccines do not prevent transmission of COVID or infection. Lane County Public Health would serve our community so much better if Mr. Adams and other staff would focus on alternative prophylactics and remedies that could actually provide meaningful protection and treatment, and take some inspiration for proactive community health from neighbor Washington State, where the Washington State Board of Health voted against adding the COVID vaccination to state administrative code requirements for students in kindergarten through 12th grade. Bravo. And second, the mellowing of the COVID narrative has been a long time coming, but now we must remain vigilant in standing against the true objective of the pandemic, and that is the rollout of digital identities. The COVID vaccination passports are a Trojan horse for this national and global objective to track and trace every individual. Dr. Robert Malone, the outspoken inventor of the mRNA technology, had this to say, quote, "In terms of the bigger picture of why it is really hard to make sense out of what is going on in the Canadian government, now the European Union's got a new bill going forward that for mandated vaccines and QR codes and tracking. It's going to be in perpetuity for the coronavirus. This is an RNA virus, just the same as influenza. It only makes sense. This only makes sense at all is that it's part of a broader agenda that isn't about public health. And I think a strong case can be made that this is associated with a desire to establish a social credit system," unquote. And that would be a social credit system that already exists in China. So we must stay vigilant to the global efforts to continue the digital identification for all human beings, which is why it is alarming at this time in particular that the Oregon Health Authority of unelected public servants is quietly rolling out a digital vaccine card in Oregon. Please commit to keeping this government control tool out of Lane County. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Our next speaker will be Peter Mead, followed by Melinda Montgomery. Peter, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment. Peter, I do show you are self-muted. There you go.
Good morning, Chair Farr and Lane Commissioners. You hear a clicking sound?
We do.
Do you still hear me now? Do you still hear me now?
Yes, affirmative.
Yes, we do.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Farr and Lane Commissioners. My name is Peter Mead and I live in Northwest Eugene. Lane County's pandemic response has lost our trust. To restore trust, please do not implement the so-called smart health card. Lane County has followed the CDC and the CDC has let us all down. First, the CDC told us to lock down 2 weeks to flatten the curve. Then the CDC told us to wear cloth masks that it recently admitted have virtually no effect on transmission. And now the CDC has set lower developmental benchmarks for our young children because wearing masks has delayed their development. The vaccines were supposed to give us herd immunity. Then the CDC told us that, whoops, vaccines don't prevent infection or transmission. Then the CDC told us that vaccination would still prevent more serious cases. In January, we learned that wasn't true either. In Scotland in January, vaccinated people had higher case rates, hospitalization, and death than the unvaccinated. In England, the Blackpool Victoria Hospital found that 71% of its COVID patients were already triple vaxxed. On February 2nd, Israel, with the world's highest vaccination rate, also had the highest COVID death rate. Some Israelis had received a fourth shot by then. On February 21st, the CDC admitted it had withheld data about unfavorable booster outcomes in the age groups 18 to 49 years. Dear Lane Commissioners, do you still trust the CDC? The CDC doesn't trust itself. CDC Director Rochelle Walensky has been trying to walk back the agency's failed COVID narrative. In a March 3rd interview, she said the CDC relied too heavily on vaccines to defeat COVID. She also admitted the science, far from being settled, is gray rather than black and white. Vax passports and exclusionary tools like Oregon Smart Health Card Digital ID are the next step in the CDC's failed response. Exclusionary tools support a police state social credit system like the one in communist China. We don't need that here. Our medical emergency has passed and America is not communist. Looking back, people can understand that the Lane County Commissioners initially followed the CDC. But 2 years later, the CDC narrative has collapsed. The Pfizer vaccine trial documents have been released. According to researchers, a finding of clinical fraud is likely. This would cancel Pfizer's legal immunity and open the door to litigation against any governmental body that implements vax passports and exclusionary tools like the Oregon Digital ID. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your public comment. Our next speaker will be, Melinda Montgomery, followed by Sue Craig. Melinda, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public testimony.
Good morning. I'm Melinda Montgomery and I live in Notai. I'm incredibly disappointed in a portion of this body. Joe, Heather, Lori, you've demonstrated that being honest, truthful, someone of principle is not a valued character attribute to serve in any capacity with the county, paid or volunteer. It was brought to your attention that Don Leslie, a member of the Lane County Budget Committee, lied when asked about voting for a pay increase for you, the county commissioners. Now, this might be a stress response when being put on the spot, responding with a lie, or maybe it was deliberate because, you know, how would these hayseeds in Mapleton know how to look up the recording of a budget committee meeting? Either way, it was a lie, fabrication, concealment, whatever synonym you want to use. If it's a stress response, then she needs to get out of the public light and find another way to serve her community. If it was deliberate, then she needs to be removed immediately because there's absolutely no place in public office for a habitual liar. The part that is even more disconcerting to me is that the three of you are okay working with someone who can't tell the truth when confronted with an uncomfortable question or situation. You proceeding to go ahead and reappoint her to the budget committee without missing a beat, more about your integrity and honor than Don's inability to tell the truth. But instead of having one person who can't tell the truth, We have 3 dishonorable people serving on the county commission and 4 total that we know of serving on the budget committee. As a parent and as a teacher, I am consistent about the necessity of telling the truth. If I find out you have lied, then the consequence for the lie is going to be much harsher than it was for the original incident. As a group of commissioners, anything and everything you say is now suspect, including what you have said in the past. As an example, Lori, you and I went on a trip together with 3 other people. We flew to Seattle, paid for by Head Start for a multi-day training on new curriculum. Unfortunately, you were stuck in your room the entire time due to illness. I now wonder if that was the truth. Maybe you just wanted an all-expense paid trip to Seattle and
Ms. Jones, do we have an accurate clock time? I believe our clock time is inaccurate.
It is inaccurate. She has about 30 seconds left.
Pardon my interruption. Please continue with 40 more seconds.
Thank you for interrupting. Maybe you just wanted an all-expense paid trip to Seattle and a 3-night stay at a SeaTac hotel. But I see you're okay with reappointing a liar back to the budget committee. So now everything I know about you from the past until today is suspect. How do I know you, Joe, or Heather are telling the truth unless there's verifiable evidence? Your actions are as dishonest as if you were the one looking me in the eye, denying you voted for the pay increase. I'm asking you to examine your reappointment of Don Leslie to the Lane County Budget Committee and reverse it. Everyone in this county deserves people of honor and integrity to represent them in all capacities. For you to support anything less is moral turpitude, and it's downright disrespectful of your office and your constituents.
Thank you for your public comment, and I do apologize for the clock error. Our next speaker will be Sue Craig, followed by Dan Salea. Sue, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public testimony.
Good morning, and thank you all for listening to us. We really do appreciate your taking the time to do this. I am concerned, along with the group that I belong to, which is Interfaith Earthkeepers here in Springfield and Eugene. And we are hoping that you will go back and revisit what was in the county's draft for the Climate Action Plan, which you all worked so hard on. And we do appreciate all the efforts there. We would like you to replace the actions that you took, and I think they have been spelled out carefully by Dylan Plummer. And so I'll leave it at that part. What we would love is for us to be very aware, which I think you all are, of what is coming in our world as far as climate change. And we truly need to stop using any kind of fossil fuel. And I truly hope that you will very much consider that Northwest Natural, which I call unnatural gas, wants you, through their PR and their careful lobbying, to keep pushing gas, which, as you know, we have to bring in from other states. Not a good idea. So please, let's electrify our future with solar, with all the wonderful things that we can do. And I'm going to ask you all to think about that very carefully. This is our future. Thank you so much, and thank you for listening.
Thank you for your public comment. Our next speaker will be Peter Mead, I apologize, followed by Dean Salea. Peter, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public testimony.
Hi, there is a mistake here. I already had the privilege of addressing the commissioners earlier, and thank you so much for the time.
Thank you. Thank you. Dan Salea, or Dean Salea, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public testimony.
Thank you for your time, commissioners. Since we're all in this together, I feel it is imperative that you have this information so that you can make informed decisions. Consider this. In the year 1969, Dr. Herbert Lay, former commissioner of the FDA, made this comment. I quote, "The FDA protects the big drug companies and is subsequently rewarded. And using the government's police powers, they attack those who threaten the big drug companies. People think that the FDA is protecting them. It's not. What the FDA is doing and what the public thinks it is doing are as different as night and day." Since then, the FDA is no better. Recently, the nonprofit Public Health and Medical Professionals for Transparency filed a Freedom of Information Act to the FDA for data on the Pfizer vaccine. The response from the FDA was they needed 55 years and then they needed 75 years to release the data. Think about that. However, by court order, they were forced to release the documents. The documents show us why they wanted the delay. In the first 3 months, there were 42,000 adverse events and 1,223 deaths. The data on these vaccines should have been available to the general public from the beginning. Why did it take a court order? All the government has to have access to these documents and said nothing. The COVID vaccine should never have been approved. Now, because of the situation, I find it hard to believe what the government says about COVID and the vaccine. It is responsible of all government health authorities to keep us safe and healthy. Also, are you aware of this whistleblower? A regional director who was employed at the research organization Ventavia Research Group has told the BMJ, British Medical Journal, that the company falsified data, unblinded patients, employed inadequately trained vaccinators, and was slow to follow up on adverse events reported in Pfizer's pivotal phase 3 trial. Staff who conducted quality control checks were overwhelmed by the volume of problems they were finding. After repeatedly notifying Ventavia of these problems, the regional director, Book Jackson, emailed a complaint to the US Food and Drug Administration, and that same day was fired. Jackson has provided the BMJ with dozens of internal company documents, photos, audio recordings, and emails. I challenge our local health authorities to examine the Pfizer documents. I will leave you with this quote from the CEO of the insurance company One America. "We are seeing right now the highest death rates we have seen in the history of this business, not just at One America." The company's CEO, Scott Davidson, said in an online news conference, "The data is consistent across every player in that business." Just to give you an idea how bad that is, a 3 sigma or 1 in a 200-year catastrophe would be a 10% increase over pre-pandemic, he said. So 40% is unheard of. After considering the information I share with you today, I hope you investigate the facts around the COVID vaccine. The documents are available at Public Health and Medical Professionals for Transparency website. There will you find the court documents and Pfizer documents to download. If you want more information, please feel free to email me. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your public comment. At this time, I do apologize. I've kind of had some issues on my end with hands being raised. I do show our final presenter is Nick Anselmo. If you have not been called upon and you wish to speak, please raise your hand and I will call upon you following Nicholas Anselmo. Mr. Anselmo, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public testimony.
Good morning, County Commissioners. I'd like to apologize. Maybe I got myself wrong or I was wrong in the past for calling you cowards. I think there might be something else going on. I can't believe that we're still in virtual meetings. I can't really believe that you're that afraid. We know that you go out, you expect other people to go out, you expect society to function, and you expect other people to not be afraid and function in a normal manner. We have other aspects of our society that are unmasking, thank God, and we are getting away from the divisiveness of who's got shots and who doesn't have shots, particularly as the truth has come out or the previous conspiracy theories that the shots don't stop the spread. But we know, I know, you know, we all know that you're behind screens not because of health, and it has nothing to do with health, because we know that you go out. Not only did you go out, you went out maskless. So there's no reason for us or anyone to suspect that you are cowards or that you are afraid. So if you're not cowards and if you're not afraid, then why are we still behind screens? And I would really appreciate the county commissioners to address this fundamental issue. And it has not been addressed and it has not been talked about. It was talked about last night at the Oregon Health meeting. And I was very appreciative of that. And they came to the conclusion that a hybrid meeting would be necessary. I called out against an excuse that it was because of technological issues. And we all know that it's not technological issues, because we had in meetings before and we have digital meetings now. I don't see why we can't have both now. So I would just like you to take that into consideration and take into consideration the highlights of all of the health protocols that have been proven to be non-effective. I hope everyone has a great day.
Thank you for your public comment. At this time, I do not show anyone else has raised their hand to give additional public testimony, so I will return the meeting to you, Chair Farr.
Thank you, Ms. Jones, for your professional handling of the public comment. Then we'll move along to Commissioner's response. Excuse me, get the right words here. Commissioner's response to public comments and or other issues or remonstrances. I will look to the queue for commissioners. Commissioner Bozievich.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to quickly say that as soon as Harris Hall is available, I know it's under some repair right now, I would urge this board to begin some kind of in-person meeting, even if it's a hybrid meeting. I think, we were almost there last spring before the surge, the various surges shut down our efforts to do so. And I think at this time, it makes sense for us to try and get back on track to doing that. And I'd just like to also remind the board that under Robert's Rules of Order, those that voted on the winning side of a motion can make a motion to reconsider that at the next board meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bozievich. I currently see no hands in the queue. We'll give it one moment. Oh, Commissioner Krieger.
Thank you, Chair.
There we go.
Thank you and good morning. I just wanted to appreciate Mark Smith from Lane Bloodworks, who gave us public comment on March 5th about the critical shortage of blood supply in Lane County. I went and gave blood last Friday. It was simple, it was quick, it was easy to schedule, and I just want to encourage anybody watching. I had no idea that we had the shortage that we do, and it's just so important as community leaders and as the Board of Health to encourage folks we know who are eligible to give blood to please consider doing so, and that I was in touch with our county administrator and understand prior to my taking office, we used to have worksite blood drives, and that was suspended during COVID. So just encouraging us to consider reinstituting those as soon as it's safe to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Krieger. Commissioner Burney.
Thank you, Chair. Forgive my delay here. I believe, unless I'm wrong, I believe all of us are prepared to have in-person meetings. And my understanding was that because of Harris Hall retrofits, we're simply unable to do that. That's unfortunately scheduling. It's really too bad. A crystal ball.
Poor excuse.
I'm sorry. It's too bad that a crystal ball couldn't have coordinated that. And I'd also like to say, just to share with the board, ironically, on the first day that the mask mandate for indoor buildings was lifted, had the opportunity to go to Bob Kiefer Center here in Springfield, where there was a girls volleyball 12U, which means 12 and under, statewide tournament. And it was so refreshing. By the way, I won't talk about the winning team, but I'm related to one of them. And it was so refreshing to see kids be kids, parents yelling and screaming from across the state. And really, it was just this big sigh of relief as we get moving forward. And Chair, I would also like to thank the people that made testimony around a climate action plan. Regardless of what the final plan is that this board adopts, we are moving forward with that, and doing something is better than doing nothing. And I appreciate everyone's testimony today. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Burney. Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to share that I was at the Cottage Grove City Council meeting last night, as I periodically check in. And we had the pleasure of having our new Health and Human Services Director, Eve Gray, there to talk about and encourage the city of Cottage Grove to participate in our new federally qualified health care clinic that we're trying to put in down there at the LCC building. They also are having some really wonderful, lengthy discussions about affordable housing and what they can do for their unsheltered down there. These are really in-depth conversations with great questions and a lot of really quality information that's being presented. I'm really proud of how they're facilitating those conversations, and I expect them to go on because there's lots of questions to be answered and how they're going to deal with those that are unsheltered in their local area. But it is something to watch for other smaller towns and cities, as they are a true model of putting in a variety of different kinds of housing styles that meet the needs of those that are very low income. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Buck. I'll take a moment in the queue. Just a reminder that we did activate Egan warming centers several times over the course of the last several weeks. And I want to put out a personal thanks to the men and women who act as volunteers and also the coordinators of the Egan warming centers, providing a service that few other communities have the type of service that Egan presents. Just want to remind people who Tom Egan was. Tom Egan was a cavalry officer in the U.S. Army. He and I had a chance to serve with Tom in an infantry unit. Tom was a man of great intelligence. He was a man who was very caring for his fellow human beings, and he died. He froze to death one night, or died of complications of the cold one night in West Eugene. Tom's legacy lives on, and once again, thank you to the men and women who provide the volunteer services and the administration of the Egan warming centers. With that, we'll move along to the next portion of our agenda. At the sound of my gavel, I will be recessing the Board of County Commissioners, and we will reconvene as a joint meeting of the Board of Health and Board of Commissioners. That meeting will last until for approximately half an hour, perhaps 45 minutes, at which point we'll go back into our regular session. So welcome. We are the joint meeting of the Board of Health and Board of County Commissioners. Mr. Mokrahajski, do we have any adjustments to the agenda?
No.
To the board, I see none. Any emergency business?
No.
I will mention, Mr. Mokrahajski, that Mr. Adams did send this morning, or late perhaps yesterday, he sent a PowerPoint presentation that's going to be a part of the presentation today. It should be in everybody's inbox if you've not looked at it yet. Mr. Mokrahajski, I'll turn it over to you and your panel.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. I'd like to take a moment here today, as tomorrow will be Mr. Adams' last day as our incident commander. And I'd like to just take this moment to reflect on what has been accomplished by our entire team, our incident command team, our public health team, and our Corps of volunteers, our policy board here at the Board of Commissioners and Board of Health over the course of the past 2 years, the past year in particular. To note that as 2021 began, when Mr. Adams was hired, actually started in December of 2020, Lane County was only 14 days into the COVID-19 vaccination campaign. Our hospitals, there were only our hospitals had received small amounts of vaccine for administration to frontline healthcare workers. That first week of the new year, we received our first shipment of Moderna vaccine to Lane County Public Health, 800 doses. We'll fast forward now to we've administered well over 200,000 doses to the community. But as of that time, and boy, how we forget, particularly in the context of some of the tone of what we hear now. At the time in early 2021, people were elbowing each other to get a vaccine. Everybody wanted a vaccine. And of course, now we've had over 275,000 residents in Lane County. The vast majority of our community has been vaccinated, largely because of the incredible work of our team in public health, led by, over the past year, our emergency response effort and Mr. Adams. We have forged close partnerships with our cities, with the University of Oregon, with our hospitals, and we needed to do that to scale up mass vaccination operations. Had never done anything like this in history in Lane County at the scale that we were being asked to do it. By the third week of January 2021, we opened our first mass vaccination clinic at our Lane Event Center. We delivered 1,434 doses of Pfizer and Moderna vaccine to phase 1 eligible residents. At that time, there was criticism that we only had doses eligible. We had such a small amount, and it was only eligible for those that were frontline workers. And of course, so many people in the community were demanding vaccine because it was, as it is today, still the #1 defense against COVID-19, particularly for individuals who are on the front lines, who've been battling this disease for the past 2 years, who had no defense other than wearing an N95 mask or keeping distance. But of course, that wasn't an option. The keeping distance piece and isolating and quarantining and staying away was not an option for our frontline healthcare and first responders. So that early work then continued in February of 2021. We opened our second mass vaccination facility at the Lane Community College and a third mass vax clinic at Autzen Stadium in March. We carried operations out of the Eugene Springfield metro area with many mass pop-up clinics in Florence, Cottage Grove, Blue River, Junction City, Oak Ridge, and other areas. By June of 2021, we had reached 57% vaccination rate in Lane County after delivering nearly 100,000 doses via mass vaccination. Throughout this process, we've been mindful of equity, and Mr. Adams done an incredible job with the team in public health of leading with a focus on equity, making sure that that we went out, that we didn't just ask people to come to us, but that we went out into the community and met folks where they were at. We launched our first mobile mission on February 5th, 2021 to provide 34 vaccinations to residents of long-term care facilities. That wasn't addressed through the federal program. By June, we delivered 115 mobile clinics and over 5,300 shots in concert with our search and rescue and other community partners, reaching communities of color, rural communities, vulnerable elders, wildfire survivors, all individuals who found it more difficult to come to our mass vaccination clinics. Throughout the summer, we put vaccination opportunities out to where people were gathered at bus stations, at libraries, pools, water parks, even at Lane County Fair. And as summer concluded, our response was ramping up for booster shots as the federal administration said boosters for all in late August to begin by September 20th. We delivered boosters to over 14,600 people. And on November 9th, we opened our first pediatric clinic at Lane Event Center and delivered 126 shots on that date to kids aged 5 to 11. My child, my 10-year-old was one of those. County government has delivered well over 200,000 vaccinations to date with the assistance of a tremendous corps of volunteers. Over 800 individuals in our community have volunteered. I was one of those volunteers. My wife was one of those volunteers. She was a more valuable volunteer as a nurse practitioner who could actually stick people in an arm. I just share that as two people of 800 volunteers in our community that volunteered their time to show up on Saturdays and Sundays and weeknights to do what they felt was in the best interest and what absolutely is in the best interest of our community to keep particularly the vulnerable population. So it's sometimes hard for me to hear those criticisms because we know that particularly the people that are on the front lines, my wife is a healthcare professional. We employ healthcare professionals in our organization and throughout our community who have had to be at our hospitals and clinics for the past 2 years, serving people, making sure that people, not only the COVID patients, but the other patients that found it more difficult to gain access to healthcare because our hospitals were filled with COVID patients, these healthcare workers in our organization, our community, have done so much work over the past year, and it has put so much strain on them and their families that it's sometimes hard to hear the criticism of the incredible lift that has been done by our healthcare community in this work. So I think I will pause there. I just want to also say that, the board here, I want to appreciate our Board of Health and Board of Commissioners, who to date has implemented no mandates. You have not required a mask mandate of the community. You have not required a vaccination mandate of the community, but you have been responsive and supportive of our public health's, the best knowledge and science that we have to bring to you. And when our state government has said this is the right thing to do, we have followed that guidance. When our local public health officials and community partners in the health and education spheres have asked for support and assistance, you have been there to support that work. So I want to appreciate that. And then all the other work that's happened, the thousands of calls that our call center staff have fielded, tens of thousands of calls from the community over the past couple of years, the case management logistics team that has not only done contact tracing, quarantine and isolation support, but literally provided groceries and pharmacy goods for over 1,800 limited income households this past year. And the list goes on and on. And so we're here today just to call out Mr. Adams and thank Mr. Adams for the great work he's done, because every great team and every great lift needs a strong leader. And Mr. Adams has served in that role over the course of the past year plus. And so we use this opportunity to thank him for his incredible leadership and the team of staff and volunteers that he has helped to lead. So welcome, commissioners, to make any comments there. And I think I've probably stolen some thunder from Mr. Adams. I also, as Mr. Adams wraps up, would like to invite Dr. Warren to share any comments, because she's worked very closely with Mr. Adams over the course of the past year. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Mokrajski, and to the board, we will be reconvening in regular session for a 10 a.m. time certain. That is a hard time certain today. So we have about 17 minutes prior to the reconvening for a 10 a.m. time certain. To the board, or for responses to Mr. Mokrajski. Mr. Mokrajski, thank you for a very comprehensive recap of the last 2 years. And I will look to the queue to see if any board members. Yes, Commissioner Burney.
Thank you, Chair. First, Steve, thank you for reminding me of not only the lift that has been done by staff, but this was a year that I was sort of a reluctant chair, if you would, and it was exhausting on all levels. I want to just add a bit to your story there. I want to remind you that, to best of my understanding, science evolves. It's not static. And we were dealing with something that really we had to rely on public health, because this was new. And I remember very much staff asking me to lobby for more Pfizer or Moderna, because the demand back in those early days of last year exceeded the supply so tremendously. And you had organized an infrastructure of providing that choice to our residents. Again, I remember vividly, there were no mandates. It was just a matter of those that wanted the vaccine. And apparently about 70% or more of the residents in Lane County chose that. I remember vividly though, it was just tough. And I was on opposite sides sometimes of the governor's and we as staff orders as it related to masking, or when, remember, gyms, or when different venues could reopen. This staff has been incredibly supportive. And I want to remind commissioners, although I probably don't have to, that we all were in the receipt of emails from extremes of both sides. I remember vividly, there were some emails that said, if you allow anything to reopen ever, you're committing murder, ever, because we're scared of this. And then there was the other extreme side that sent emails saying, if you don't open everything immediately, you're taking away our liberty forever. This has been on the vocal level amongst the loud few, a very divisive sort of thing, and understandably so. But I also agree with you, Mr. Mokrahysky. The work staff has done to create options for people that just want to live their life and have their kids be as healthy as possible and get back to work as soon as possible. And we're finally starting to do that. So I'm really relieved for that. And I thank you for reminding me about the ordeals of last year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Burney. Vice Chair Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. I'm mindful of the time, and I know we haven't actually gotten our report from the Board of Health, and we have some important items to hear. So I don't know if we want to make any adjustments to the agenda to honor the time certain with our out of organization guests, but I also recognize our staff have commitments and schedules as well. So just putting that out there to give you time to mull on that, Chair, while I make brief comments of appreciation to Steve Adams. I want to recognize not only has he been clear and steady and consistent in his communication with us in these public meetings, but has been incredibly responsive during off hours, particularly in the early rollout of vaccinations, helping people navigate, getting an appointment, making sure they were getting to the right clinic at the right time for the right shot. And also navigating the complex multi-jurisdictional system that this pandemic required us to coordinate with, from the state OHA and the federal government and CDC, as well as down to our local jurisdictions, including the cities and school districts within Lane County. So you've just done a masterful job of being that connective tissue in a really complex organism that has been this pandemic and its response. And I just appreciate your calm and steady demeanor, your commitment to being respectful to everyone and answering every question thoroughly, and to being so available to us as commissioners, to the staff, and to the community. So huge appreciation. We can't possibly do justice in just a few minutes here in this meeting, but we are very much grateful to you for your efforts. Thank you, Mr. Adams.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Commissioner Buck.
I couldn't agree with that statement more. Mr. Adams, you've been here day in and day out, fully invested in all of the recovery and process of the COVID-19 pandemic. It's just, you impress me every time that you come on. I appreciate your commitment to the work here at Lane County. I hope there's a place for you here even after this position, but it is kind of the end of a interesting little era of Lane County's public health response efforts. Knowing that this position may come to an end also means that we're hopefully moving on from this pandemic in a good way. We don't know what will come in the future, but I couldn't say it better than Commissioner Traeger, and I thank you so much for your work here.
Thank you, Commissioner Buck. Commissioner Bozievich.
Thank you. Very quickly, Mr. Adams, I just want to say you've done an exceptional job as our incident commander. And I just also want to thank the rest of the staff in public health, the people that moved over from other departments temporarily. It's been an amazing effort in a very unknown sort of atmosphere, as we kind of were learning as we went, trying to help keep our community safe. And in doing so, people can look back and in 2020 hindsight, criticize steps we took. But I think everything we did was with good heart and the best knowledge we had at the time. And you did a great job. I also just want to acknowledge our administrator, who took a county that hadn't really focused on emergency planning and incident command structures, and early on took that issue on. And we've seen our ability to respond to emergencies, whether it was Snowmageddon or the Holiday Farm fire, outstrip other counties' abilities because of the focus on emergency planning, ICS training, and other resilience efforts that we've done here at Lane County. And I just want to thank Mr. Mokrahysky for making that a priority in our organization.
Thank you, Commissioner Bozievich. I'll take just one moment and to the board very quickly. I'm going to make a decision to delay the time certain until 10 minutes past 10. That will give us 10 minutes additional for the Board of Health, but we'll try and keep it as concise as possible. And I apologize to the participants in the time certain at 10 o'clock. 2 years ago, I was in Easton Mall in Columbus, Ohio with our middle grandchild, Clement Toussaint. And we were walking around. Before we went to the mall, we went to the grocery store, bought a few things. And by the time we came back from the mall, the grocery store, which had been a regular grocery store, was all of a sudden out of toilet paper. That's how quickly that hit 2 years ago. And we were in Ohio at the time. A lot has happened since then. And Mr. Adams, I want to personally thank you for the professional nature that you have provided, the professional work you provided to us. And the most important thing that's been the most important to me is that, as Commissioner Bernie said, we have people yelling on both sides, people expressing their strong opinions on both sides. No masks or masks forever. And a lot of people are in between. But when I am asked in Albertsons or wherever it may happen to be that I'm shopping, why do we still have masks, or why do we not more strictly enforce masks? I have to have answers for those people, whatever their question may happen to be. And you've given me a good dialogue to respond to people, whether they want masks forever or masks never. And we have both. So Mr. Adams, thank you very much. Ms. Mokrajski, I'll give it back to you and the panel for the balance of the meeting.
All right, Mr. Adams, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Mokrajski, Chair Farr, Commissioners. That was most unexpected. I am grateful to each and every one of you for your kind words and for your support throughout this incredible journey. And I am very grateful to the staff here as well. Dr. Warren and her team at Public Health have been just tremendous. I am going to now share my screen, if I may. And let's see. All right. So I am hopeful that you all are seeing our most recent case rates. So these, I'm showing yesterday's data update. We are showing in the last 24 hours, the morning numbers just came through to me, an additional 38 cases beyond what you were seeing here, bringing us to 56,825 for the pandemic as a whole. We're now reporting 63.5 cases per 100,000 of population. And in the 2 weeks since my last update to the Lane County Board of Health, that's essentially half of where we were from a cases per 100,000 perspective. So we have continued to see the decline in our newly reported cases. So putting this into the full 2-year episode, seeing the relative height of the Omicron curve and seeing that we are now from a cases reported perspective back to even now below the end of Delta before Omicron took off. So we are now entering the territory of where we were in the summer of 2021 before Delta arrived. Our hospitals have continued to depressurize as well. This morning, we're reporting 29 in hospital, 2 of whom are in ICU beds, and that represents a pretty significant reduction. In the 2 weeks since I last presented, we've reported 20 additional deaths in Lane County. So that is clearly the final lagging indicator, sadly, of any of these surges. The deaths lag by a few weeks of the reported cases, and we continue to see that moving forward. I'm hoping that that actually represents, we see a steady slowdown in that number. We're now reporting 486 total deaths for the COVID-19 pandemic in Lane County. Our vaccination rates, vaccination efforts continue apace. This morning, we were reporting 72.24% of our entire population. The relative rate of vaccinations has declined. We're now reporting across all providers about 200 shots a day, and that is inclusive of both first and second shots, as well as individuals coming in for boost shots. So this is the slowest pace that we've seen since those early days when 200 shots was all we could muster because of vaccine scarcity. We're now, considering where we are with our population, we're reporting about 88.4% of our 65 plus. We're reporting 78.3% vaccination rates for our 50 to 64-year-olds. In our youth, our 12 to 17-year-olds are at 72%, and our 5 to 11-year-olds are at 38.4%. So I'm very pleased to be able to provide an additional weekly update on where we are with respect to the newest COVID community level indicators from the Centers for Disease Control. You'll recall that we've looked historically at an indicator combination of test positivity rates plus cases per 100,000 of population. And we're now, with this new indicator, we're looking at hospitalization utilization as well as case rates. And you'll note in the upper left, this was us the week of February 4th. We were in high on this, but just barely. The following week, the week of March 3rd, in the lower right, we had moved into medium, but we had moved very rapidly. And with the data as of Friday, when this was published, Wayne County and even Douglas County to the south had moved into low. So we will probably see maybe a little bit of bouncing in this. When you're close to the bounds, you can see a little bit, but this is clearly moving in the right direction. So in light of this indicator, in light of the low case rates, in light of really the changes that we are seeing at the state level with the reduction of mandatory measures for indoor masking, as well as masking in K-12 environments, we believe it is time now to begin to pivot some of our messaging for the public as a whole. Now, I did share a series of slides last evening for each of you that summarize some of the public messaging that we are doing here at Wayne County Public Health, really based on risk communication to individuals, because we're now in a moment where people will now need to begin to have conversations with themselves and families and in their workplaces about how to manage risk when statewide rules are no longer in place. My colleague, Dr. Webster, here at Wayne County Public Health noted a particular campaign coming out of the Irish government, the RSVP, Risk, Symptoms, Venue, and People, as a particularly clever way to help people kind of think through, do the mental math in terms of whether or not they should go out for a particular social activity. So very quickly, these slides kind of detail the questions, and this is stuff that we are pushing out to the public. So, really kind of asking yourself questions about your risk. Are you vaccinated? Do you have underlying health conditions? Your symptoms, are you sick? If you're sick, stay home. It's that simple. Get yourself tested. Don't be afraid to ask others who you might be meeting whether or not they're sick. That's a perfectly acceptable question. What's the nature of the venue? Is it going to be crowded? Are you going to a very crowded place? Is there low ventilation within that venue? And specifically, what's the nature of the people? Are you going to visit grandma in a long-term care facility, or are you going out to dinner, where you might have more room? So each of those kinds of contexts really are just simple, common sense questions that we can each ask ourselves. And we're also providing simple and similar guidance to places of business, employers, to places of business that are inviting the public in for their custom, as well as venues that are hosting large numbers of people. And then really, our engagement here is really just helping employers that it's been a minute since the last time you looked at what the requirements are. Let's have a refresh your memory. Let's let you see what's happening. And we're here, of course, in Wayne County Public Health to answer questions and to specifically help you think through what policies you want to set. And really trying to, at the end of the day, help business owners, venue owners, and others recognize that they still can set whatever policies they wish. With the demise of statewide rules, really the onus is back to each and every actor about how they're going to manage for public health. So It's important to note that this public health advisory actually supersedes the 2 emergency public health advisories that the Lane County board put forward back in August as the Delta wave was upon us. We specifically want to kind of put something forward that really helps people to understand that that moment has passed, that we're in a new moment. And with that, I'm going to pivot to Dr. Warren, as tomorrow is my next day. And whilst that is the case, the work around COVID continues. Dr. Warren.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, I'd like to start with some deep appreciation for Steve's role in getting us to this place. We are in an excellent position now for the next phase of the pandemic response, and that is largely due to Steve's efforts. Just briefly, what I want to highlight about Steve is that he has not only a range of talents and expertise, but also a deep commitment to public service. He could have spent his time in this last year in many other ways in doing many other things, but he chose to join a pandemic emergency response, which has been very intense and which he has managed beautifully. And I think we all owe him a great debt in the community for all of the work that he's done. He's also told us, he has a lot of experience in emergency response, that we should be celebrating the release of our incident commander, because that means we are in a place in the emergency response in which it is safe to do so. I can tell you, all of us in the EOC share an enthusiasm for the direction that we are going in the pandemic, but we are going to miss Steve's direction and leadership and sense of humor terribly. He's been really quite an asset to Lane County Public Health, and we're excited to work with him in the future as well, I hope in some capacity. So I just want to address that going forward, we will be maintaining a division operations center because our COVID response is not over. We are reducing our overall effort, but all the aspects and the activities that have been included in this response will continue in some form. So surveillance, we still have the call center. We are doing outreach and education, as well as vaccination, testing, and providing support for isolation in the community when it's needed. This I won't go into very deeply, but this is our new structure. So you can just see that all of those activities are still represented in our command structure. And we have many good people that are continuing with us in these positions and have a lot of experience and commitment as well to this COVID response as we kind of move into the next phase. Our focus now is really equity. I think initially we had really focused on the numbers, right? We really wanted to reach the most numbers of the greatest number of people to create herd immunity. That is really our goal for vaccination. But we still have a long way to go to achieve health equity in vaccination. So that's really going to be our goal going forward. We'll continue to offer testing and vaccination in these smaller venues when we partner with community-based organizations and other stakeholders in the communities, including small businesses and schools. We will further develop our community-based organization network and our community partnerships program to meet those needs in the communities. And we'll continue to learn from the experiences in other jurisdictions and incorporate those into our response. So going forward, these are really new programs to us that are the really great aspects of the pandemic response that we're carrying forward, and that is the community partnerships program. One, we also are developing our public health reserve corps, so we are better prepared for the next emergency. And as well, the community mobile response is a new unit within the communicable disease program that is much more community-based. We had been very clinic-based, so this is really a new evolution in our services. And we will continue our strategic planning as the county strategic planning evolves as well, to integrate the county goals and to also focus on how we can achieve health equity across all of the public health programs and in all of our services. And those conclude my remarks, Chair Farr.
Thank you, Dr. Warren. It's almost embarrassing that we have to cut this short today because there are so many things to say in retrospect about what's happened over the course of the last 2 years and the amazing response that you, Mr. Adams and the balance of your team. Changing on a dime, it seems every single day you had to put forward a new set of projections, a new set of protocols. That's a bit of an over-exaggeration, but it's been pretty amazing to see Lane County Public Health in action during this period of time. Hopefully we're looking in the rearview mirror. None of us is counting on that 100%, but for the meantime, let's continue to look in the rearview mirror and move forward. Dr. Warren, thank you so much. Mr. Mokrahisi, I believe that we do have before us a board order. And bear with me 1 second. We have before us, I'm sorry, order number 22-03-15-04. Oops, no, that's a warranty deed. Never mind.
05.
It's 05. There we go. Thank you. 22-03-15-05 in the matter of a public health advisory related to personal protective measures against COVID-19 following the Delta and Omicron variant waves of SARS-CoV-2. Mr. Mokrahisi, any discussion of the board order?
And Chair, certainly I'd welcome Mr. Adams and Dr. Warren to add any comments. This is really language that is intended to clarify the role of Lane County and Lane County Public Health as we move forward with these response efforts. I do see that Commissioner Burney's hand is up. And so we are asking for action on this item. And Chair, we have a lot going on here today, and I know you're trying to get to the other item. I also know we were not, and there were some questions over the past week. In addition to COVID-19, we have other public health challenges that we're facing, including a cluster of suicides at a local high school. And so we did want to have that conversation as well. And we clearly won't have the time right in this moment to spend on that issue, but I am talking to Dr. Warren about her availability today, and it looks like she will have some availability. So we'll coordinate that time and I think come back to that topic because that's an important one as well. So I think for now, before you go to the next item, if you have questions or comments related to COVID-19 and then the action on the resolution that's in front of you would be great.
Thank you, Mr. Mokrahisi. It seems that each time I delay a time certain, I say this is an extenuating circumstance. This certainly is. I mean, this is the end of an era, so to speak, as Mr. Adams leaves us, and really we are moving into a new phase of pandemic response. So I'm going to continue with the discussion, and we have Vice Chair Lori Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. I was simply prepared to make a motion on the order so that we can move along. And then if there's discussion, and very much appreciate staff flexing the schedule so we can give proper attention to the other public health emergency in front of us.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I will accept the motion. Then further discussion can be to the motion. So please go ahead and make the motion.
So I would move that we adopt order number 22-03-15-05 in the matter of public health advisory, et cetera, and particularly draw the public's attention to the item 3 in the therefores about us continuing to provide support to other local entities.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Moved by Vice Chair Trieger, seconded by Commissioner Buck. To the motion, Commissioner Burney.
Thank you, Chair. It feels to me, well, first, I hope and I pray that we in fact are through with this stuff. And if we're not, I hope and I pray we never again close down. Mr. Adams, you will recall last year, you counseled me to tell the public that we were through. We were getting over this. So it's very clear that we really don't know. But I'll trade your job, sir, for an end of this pandemic any day. And I know you're not losing work. It feels that we are now moving to a time of greater personal responsibility. Would you, Dr. Warren, would you say that's correct as I was looking at the messaging?
Yes, I would say that's correct. There is a great range of risk. So it really moves to the individual to help evaluate that.
Thank you. So two things. So in that regard, if you are at home and living where one of your family members has COVID, I would assume it's not personally responsible to come to a large gathering unmasked, etc. That's correct. That's like an example of we need to practice personal responsibility. I think this is also an opportunity for us to be more loving and caring for the personal choices of those around us. I think there will be people for their own reasons that will choose to wear masks. And I certainly hope that we as a community will support those decisions and not ostracize or criticize them, because we're not walking in their shoes and we don't know what comorbidities or other issues are going on in their life. Similarly, for those people that choose not to wear masks, let us hope and pray that they do so responsibly, and let us not criticize them for their decisions. I think this is a wonderful opportunity to move away from the divisiveness, to move to unification, caring for our neighbors, and getting back to a world in that regard. So I just wanted to sort of clarify the personal responsibility tone of our new messaging. And I hope that there's some care and compassion and consideration for others as we move to it, hopefully normal. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. I know I spoke too long.
You did not, Commissioner Burney. Thank you very much. And please, we'll go down the queue, and please feel free to add the comments that you wish at this point in time. This is an important moment in time. Commissioner Bozevich.
Thank you. I'm going to express a little concern here on the actual order. And I've made this concern known to Mr. Adams prior. The first, therefore, is the issuance of public health advisories superseding previous advisories, and it lists the other orders we gave. In those orders, the actual advisories were attached. We are approving an order without knowledge of what we are approving, and that's bothersome to me. I trust our staff and we've gotten kind of an outline with the RSVP of what they're going to recommend. But normally there would be a written advisory attached to this that one, the public would have had a chance to read and provide public comment on, and two, we would have had a chance to read. So I have difficulty voting in the affirmative for this without the actual advisory attached. And I'm sorry, it's a procedural thing, because I really support our staff, but it's a really difficult moment for me to just blindly say I'm okay with voting for something without knowing what I'm voting for.
Thank you, Commissioner Bozevich. And, reluctant as I am to place counsel on prompt queue, but Mr. Dingle, do you have a response to that regarding the language of this order?
Can you hear me now, Chair?
Affirmative.
Yeah, I think it's personally, I don't think that it's legally required, but I understand what Commissioner Bozevich is saying. I think it's a personal preference.
Mm-hmm. Okay, then I'll not put you on the spot anymore. You didn't expect those questions, and I apologize for that. Then let's see, I'm going to step back to the queue very quickly. I see no one else in the queue. I'll just mention to the motion that Mr. Adams sent us a PowerPoint. Steve Adams sent us a PowerPoint that really is informative. Every word of it's a document that you can print, and I think for the time being, put on your bulletin board, because the words are solid, the words are strong, and they're remarkably geared toward personal responsibility in taking care of yourself, your families, and the people around you. I agree with what Commissioner Burney said. We all feel this, that people need to take care of people. And sometimes in taking care of people, you do things that aren't exactly what it is that you would prefer to do, but you're still trying to take care of people around you. And that is the nature of being a member of this Board of County Commissioners, the nature of working in Lane County Public Health, and that is what we're doing. So with that, Commissioner Bozevich, I'm going to go ahead with the order as written. Any more discussion to the motion? Then we have before us order number 22-03-15-05. I will call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Passes 4-1 with Commissioner Bozevich opposed. Thank you very much. At this point then, thank you to the staff, Dr. Warren, your entire team. Once again, my salute to you. That was a left-handed salute. Okay.
Thank you. Just sorry, real quick, just for anyone who's watching for the Board of Health and maybe interested in the topic related to the suicide cluster and that public health emergency that we're also engaged in responding to. Our intent is to try to take that up around 11 o'clock this morning. We'll try to do that in our county administration announcements after the item time certain you're taking, and then the FSIT transportation item. We'll try to take that up later this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Montgomery. I spoke with Ms. Gray about that yesterday, so I'll be prepared for that. That's a very sober discussion we're going to have at 11 o'clock regarding the suicide cluster at South Eugene High School. With that, I will, at the sound of my gavel, I will adjourn the combined meeting of the Board of Health and Board of County Commissioners and reconvene the Board of County Commissioners. We are reconvened as the Board of County Commissioners, and we'll move directly down the agenda. Bear with me 1 second, I've lost my agenda. There we go. We'll move directly to item 6A, which is our 10 a.m. time certain, is a discussion on the Mackenzie River Discovery Center, the MRDC fundraising discussion. Mr. Mokrajski, I'm going to ask you, if you will, to convene the panel, but I'm going to offer my apologies to the folks who have interrupted their day to come here for what I personally had said was going to be a 10 o'clock time certain. I apologize for that. It's not a 10 o'clock time certain. I hope we can continue with a bold and robust discussion. Mr. Mokrajski.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure if Tom is going to take the lead on the presentation. I think I'll go ahead and turn it over to Tom to introduce the group.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. My name is Tom Hoyt. I've had the privilege of working on the dream of the Mackenzie River Discovery Center since 2007. And here we are in 2022. And it's my privilege today to introduce one of our board members, Mandy Jones. So Mandy, would you please take it away?
Sure, thank you, Tom. Good morning, commissioners. I know a few of you, but for those who don't know me, I am Mandy Jones, retired CEO of Oregon Community Credit Union and currently a board member of the Mackenzie River Discovery Center. We're excited to be with you today. And while I think we could talk forever about the Discovery Center, we understand that your time is very valuable and you have some more very serious conversations ahead of you. So we'll try to make this short. We did send in a handout to Ms. Jones with an update on the site, the old fish hatchery site, things that are happening there. So hopefully you have that. And if you have any questions after their presentation, we'll be happy to answer those. My actual main focus here today is to thank you all, just on behalf of the entire board of the Discovery Center. We really can't thank you enough for your ongoing commitment, your support, your advocacy for the Discovery Center. We truly believe that that support and understanding of the educational and economic impact the MRDC will create is one of the primary reasons for the legislature to recently grant us $3 million in lottery funds during their short session. So we are really very appreciative that you all understand that this is truly a wise investment and it has multiple returns, not just only for the fire devastated Mackenzie Valley, but for all of Lane County and all of Oregon. I'd also like to say that we're truly excited about our ongoing partnership with the county. You designated us as a priority for the county. We've been working with you and have leased the property, a 99-year lease on the property at the old fish hatchery. You've provided us lots of letters of support on behalf of the legislature. And we can't help, and the help and support that we've gotten from Alex and staff has had a huge impact on our progress. So truly, thank you again for your foresight and your vision. And thank you for your continuing support. Beyond that, one of the things that we wanted to inform you of our most recent update is to make you aware that our resignation of our executive director, Wisteria Stewart, just last week. And While this is not an unexpected, Wisteria has been out on family leave for the last 12 weeks, but we're truly sorry to see her leave the organization. She's given us permission to share the reasons for her resignation. So I'd like to read that to you now because I think it's important. And she says, "It is with a clear heart that I submit my formal resignation from the job of Executive Director of the Mackenzie River Discovery Center. I'm resigning due to circumstances beyond my control, namely my son Balin's illness with cancer, which precludes my ability to fulfill my role as Executive Director for the MRDC." So I think Wisteria understood that with the legislature granting us the $3 million, we're in fact in need of an executive director that can focus 100% on fundraising for the project and continuing to move us forward. And her focus has to be with her family and with her son. And we all support that. So it's on to a new chapter. We're not looking at this as a setback, but as an opportunity, focusing on the positive momentum and opportunities that this change will allow us with the legislative dollars. So please know that the board of directors of the MRDC is diverse, with multiple talents and experiences that will continue to move the project forward during our search for a new executive. Our board, since this just happened last week, our board is going to be discussing our strategies at our board meeting tomorrow, and then again at a upcoming planning session. So I just wanted to let you know that and understand that that will not slow us down. And then with that news, I want to turn it over to Shirley so she can update you all on our financial statuses. And again, we'll be available for questions and everything afterwards. So Shirley, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Mandy. I'm Shirley Bronstein. I've spent my career as a CPA in public accounting and as a CFO in private industry. My last position was CFO for Bigfoot Beverages here locally. Although retired now, I'm finding myself putting that background to good use as the treasurer of Mackenzie River Discovery Center, which has become a passion project for me. It is from that position of numbers, finance, strategy, I'd like to share with you our perspective on the Mackenzie River Discovery Center's financial position after the 2022 Oregon Legislative Short Session. As a result of the recent short session, Mackenzie River Discovery Center is $3 million closer to reality, and our total funds raised to date is $5 million. We thank everyone that helped with this, including all of you on the Lane County Board of Commissioners, Alex, and other county staff for helping to get us to this point. As a board of directors, we will be adjusting our plans, as you've just heard, tomorrow and in the near future, to include this $3 million investment. So what I'm sharing with you today is preliminary, but based on the facts as we know them now. As you know, our funding request was for $5.5 million. That wasn't an arbitrary number or a number that was intentionally high, hoping for a specific lower number. It is the calculation of our total project cost of $18.5 million times 40%, less the $2 million we had raised before the short session. The 40% is the generally accepted funded level that most individuals and foundations want to see a project at before they will significantly participate in a capital campaign. The $3 million we were allocated is wonderful news and very much appreciated. But what about the shortfall from the $5.5 million request? Well, our original plan was to focus building the building to house the exhibits and developing the exhibits at the same time. The building needs the exhibits, the exhibits need the building. Our intention now is to develop separate funding models for the building and the exhibits that will leverage the money we have raised, along with future donations and pledges that will be payable concurrent with the availability of the $3 million. It adds more flexibility, more complexity, and it's not the best answer for us, but because we had already planned to be fundraising to get to the 80% funded level, at which point we would start construction. But we're energized and we're confident in the support we have been shown by our supporters. In other words, that makes our work a little harder, but we're up for that challenge. That brings me to the timing of the $3 million. We don't know the exact time when the lottery bond proceeds will be available, but we do know that the funds will not be available until the bonds are issued, which is expected to be in March or April of 2023. This leaves us needing to bridge the costs for planning and design, both of the building and the exhibits, because we know we need additional money to continue with the building and exhibit planning and design, finalizing zoning, construction documents, and permits. We simply can't pause and wait for a year. Given cost escalations of late, once the bonding and omnibus budget bills were passed a little over a week ago, and we knew we were allocated lottery dollars, we began updating all of our planning estimates, and we should have those numbers to talk about by the end of this month. We would like and we would ask the opportunity to bring that analysis back to you in hopes that you can help us keep the Mackenzie River Discovery Center moving forward at a reasonable pace to being the world-class entertainment and educational center we all envision. With that, we thank you again for your past support and your time and attention today, and we welcome any questions or comments.
Thank you, Ms. Bronstein and Mr. Hoyt. I'm sorry, we'll move to see if there are any questions and comments from the board at this point in time. It seems you have a fairly specific ask, so I'll look to a cue from the board, and we'll begin with Commissioner Buck. Commissioner Buck, this is right smack dab in the middle of the district you represent. Please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it is. I couldn't be more thrilled that you got funded. I am wishing it had been the full ask, but it seemed in this last short session, everybody got a little something, but maybe not their full ask. But I do believe it brings a lot of hope to the project, and hopefully some more interest from other folks that might invest in the project. I will continue, of course, to support you all as much as I possibly can in that capital campaign. And you know, you can reach out to me anytime, and we'll continue that quest together. On a side note, together here, board, we have approved an Oregon Solutions project upriver for the recovery of the Mackenzie River corridor. And Mandy Jones here is my co-convener of that particular project. So I just wanted to properly introduce her in that role to all of you as well, as some of this will overlap. We have a large section of the Oregon Solutions project that is going to be dedicated to economic recovery. And I believe that this Discovery Center is essential as one of those opportunities as we try to create jobs and recover tourism upriver. So I wanted to make sure you all knew that Mandy and I are trying to do that challenge together. I hope in the future we can come back and have these wonderful guests again to let us know how they're moving along, as Ms. Bronstein mentioned specifically, and how we together collectively may be able to help support that movement. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Buck. Ms. Jones, first I'm going to talk to you ever so briefly, and my heart is filled with grief. Please pass along to Wisteria Stewart our thoughts and our prayers. That is the saddest of news.
Yeah. You know, she's such a smart lady, and Balin's only 2.5 years old, so very sad.
I'll get back. Commissioner Burney.
No, I want to emphasize that I know Ms. Jones. We don't know each other well, or Ms. Bronstein. I happen to know Mr. Hoyt a little better. And first off, I sort of bowed out for a few years of my community engagement in this community when my kids lost their mother to cancer, and I firmly am aware of. I can't imagine it with a child, but I'm firmly in support of Wisteria's decision, no matter how deeply it impacts this particular activity. I do want to say that while this is in Commissioner Buck's district and she's much more engaged in some of these activities, we as a board of commissioners also have supported this project every step of the way. I think we're going to continue. So my only words, Tom, or carry on. Thank you very much.
Thank you for Bernie. And we'll go to Vice Chair Trieger, then Commissioner Bozovich, and I have a few more words to say. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for this presentation. Congratulations, as Commissioner Buck said, on getting state funding. And as she mentioned, many projects didn't get funded at all, and many that got funded got partial funding. And I just want to pass along as well my personal support for the decision that was made by Wisteria to leave the organization and focus on her family and on health. And it's just one more reason. I'll just put a plug in for a national, more generous paid family and medical leave program. It's what we all need. Everyone has people they care for and shouldn't have to make decisions like that. I do know, though, from the few interactions I had with her and presentation she made here, and your success in securing the funding that you have so far, is that she's been a very capable leader for the organization and that it's in good shape. And so whatever plan the board puts in place for interim or next steps for leadership, I know that she left the organization strong and ready to use these dollars exactly as they were intended and to leverage them to help fill the funding gap. And I'm looking forward to hearing more reports back. I'm very much excited about and supportive of this project, both for the economic development opportunities upriver, but also for the educational opportunities for the community, and particularly for youth, to understand the importance of the ecosystem and the natural world that they're interacting with when they're upriver. So thank you all for your work. I know it's extra work when you're aboard and you're going through a leadership transition, but I'm sure you're all up to the task, and I thank you for it.
Thank you, Vice Chair Trieger. Commissioner Bozovich.
Thank you, Chair. So I want to kind of get back to the financial discussion we're having a little bit, because I can't discuss the other issue. It's too close to home for me. So it sounds to me, Ms. Bronstein, that what you're getting ready to ask the board is for some kind of bridge funding between now and the bond issuance. Yes. I'm in full support of us providing that if it's a reimbursable loan. I want to have a much broader discussion with the board about generalized spending of dollars on tourism in light of the request to put in a stadium, at the fairgrounds, in light of the indoor track facility people want us to fund, and all the various places people are requesting for us to invest in tourism. If it's a reimbursable loan, that comes right back out of the bond issuance, you've got my vote today. But if it's about expending Lane County resources in a non-reimbursable way on tourism, we need to have a much broader context discussion. So, and we're going to have a pretty broad context discussion about the stadium, I think, here in the near future. And one of the things that's come up is whether or not that should be coming ahead of an indoor track facility. And there's concerns about that. So the competing interest around tourism investments is very high in this community. And I just want to make sure we're prioritizing those correctly. So I just want to express that and say, you have my full support if you're just needing a bridge loan.
Thank you, Commissioner Bozovich, for your very accurate discussion of your conditional support. So, but the next few words that I have to say, Tom, I'm going to direct it straight at you. Mr. Hoyt, I'm going to direct it straight at you because you're the first person that talked to me about the Discovery Center. I think it was 35 years ago. No, it was, it seems a long time ago, or it seems like yesterday. I'm not sure exactly which, but my family, we're members of the Oregon Coast Aquarium. We're also members of the High Desert Museum. We're not suckers for this. We do this for a very good reason, because it is such an incredibly rich experience for our grandchildren, for us as the grandparents, and for the parents and other guests that we happen to take to both of those museums. I view the Mackenzie Discovery Center as on par with both of those that I just mentioned. And 50 years from now, all of us here in this room are going to be far less active than we are today. However, the Mackenzie Discovery Center will still be there, enriching the lives of people for generations to come. And that's why, one of the reasons that I support it so much. I love the aquarium, I love the High Desert Museum. Having something in our own backyard of that same caliber, that same enriching experience, what a marvelous opportunity that we do have. So with that, I'm going to say no more and ask the board for, actually, I'll ask you, Mr. Hoyt, I'll ask you and your panel, what are you asking for?
Well, as Ms. Brownstein said, we are seeing up to a $500,000 shortfall between now and a year from now in order to complete all of our planning ideas. I would like to mention to Commissioner Bozovich that tourism is just one of our plans. We are the center for economic development at the beginning of the Mackenzie Valley. And we have proven that ever since the fire, where we took care of and gave a place to meet and what have you. And so economic development is probably one of our primary reasons for asking for funding. And also education for young people. We're going to teach young people and their families how to take care of the Mackenzie Valley, its history, and how to take care of it, and especially to preserve the water and the fish, and to honor the trees and what have you. So please don't just consider us for tourism. We're very interested in that. But remember, last year or the year before, 50,000 people went to Blue Pool. We just want them to stop by our Economic Development Discovery Center and learn about the Mackenzie Valley.
Thanks, Mr. Hoyt, and we'll have a little bit further discussion. I'm gonna add this. I'm not the only person that has a 16-foot Alumaweld boat, which is called a Mackenzie River Drift Boat. Mine is a 1975, one of the very earliest. I've only had it personally for 35 years, but it's seen a lot of dips in that particular river. But even for those who have never set toe in the river, what an amazing opportunity we do have. And Mr. Mokrahysky, what are you hearing? I think Commissioner Bozovich suggested a potential of a bridge loan. If we were to wish to discuss this as a Board of County Commissioners, how would you like to move forward with that?
Yes, I think we need an item, Chair, depending on what the board's direction is. So if you're prepared to give us direction today on what you'd like us to come back with, we could do that. But certainly if there is a financial contribution or commitment of some kind, including potentially a loan, we would need to do some work to pull that together and bring it back to the board for a specific action.
Then let me take a stab at that, Steve. We've already as a board, unanimously support the Mackenzie Discovery Center. We don't need to take votes or head nods on that. But with looking around the board right now, I'll ask for maybe head nods to ask Mr. Mokrahysky to look into the possibility of a refundable loan to cover the interim between now and the time the bonds are sold in perhaps April of 2023. And sometime subsequent to that, when the Mackenzie Discovery Center will receive the allocation by the federal government, by the state government. So does that sound like it matches everybody's thoughts and I see head nods around that. And Mr. Hoyt, does that cover, and Ms. Brownstein and Ms. Jones, does that cover your request?
Let me answer that. Let me say first, if we knew exactly what we needed right now, it's only been a week and a half since all these decisions have been made, and actually the bills aren't even signed yet. So, and we haven't gotten any official notification. So that's why I'm hedging with what we said today. We had this update already scheduled, and just like with the news with Wisteria, we wanted to get that out there and let you know that this is something that we're looking to solve. We don't have a solution right now. We're not coming with a specific ask, but certainly we would look at any option to get us from here until we get the bond proceeds. We don't want to stop. We don't want to pause. We don't want to put all our team on hold waiting to get the additional funds. If it does end up being refundable out of those, it just makes our fundraising even more. But so I just wanted to make that clarification, and I really appreciate you guys all listening today and taking this in, and really appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a few more words to say. I do have a few minutes. Commissioner Burney, I know you have something burning to say, but Mandy, Ms. Jones, sounds like this is more like what you in your previous line of work might call a line of credit as opposed to a loan. So
yeah. Yeah, although at this point, the Mackenzie Discovery Center has never had any type of loans. We've done all our site, everything we've been doing is by donation. So I think the board would have to really look at that, and we'd have to figure out what that would encapsulate. Also, if we could pay it back from the funds that we get from the 3 million, because we don't know if they're targeted to just something special. So again, I think, as Shirley said, we're a little hesitant to have you jump into it, although we love it. We love that you're excited about it, you want to do something. I think we need to get you more information before we can move forward, if that's, and to be honest with you, we've talked to, staff, and we know that there is some funding coming into the county that you're going to be trying to figure out how to put out grants and stuff like that. And maybe we do it with half a loan and half a grant, or, I mean, there's so many options right now that it's just too quick, I think, to have you guys rush forward. While we appreciate it, but.
Okay, great, thanks. Then let's view this as a preliminary discussion that all ears have heard and all mouths have participated in. Commissioner Burney.
Thank you, Chair. And I would not characterize my comments as burning. So you got nothing burning from Bernie right now. From what and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I see this as a discussion item on our agenda, not an action item. And as I'm listening, it's certainly premature to act without an ask. And it's certainly premature to request an ask when all of this new information is being digested and processed. I'm seeing head shake by the organization. So there's that. And it's really, I think, premature because we don't know what our infrastructure money is going to be, what other resources may come in, what priority this overlays or not, or whether, in fact, this simply, as Commissioner Bozovich mentioned, becomes some kind of a bridge reimbursable thing to ensure that you don't lose momentum. So I'm looking forward to the ask. And I think it's fair also to say that this board is also bombarded with really good asks. So I think that's partially the context. Commissioner Bozovich, I hope you don't mind my saying this, but I think that's partially the context for those remarks. So as far as I'm concerned, we've got general board support. We don't have an ask. We've been given a status, and I look forward to the next step when you all are ready. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Then I'll go back to Mr. Mokrowski, and as Ms. Jones pointed out, this is preliminary, and so a good discussion that we've had, and everybody's heard that we are in full support, and let's wait for a more appropriate time to take a little bit more decisive action. And then, but once again, is without question, we all love it. And I'm going to drive up there on Saturday just to take a look at it. Well, any further discussion for the this agenda item? In which case, thank you very much for participating today. And once again, I apologize for the late start on the agenda item. Looking forward to what we see down the road. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Then the board will move back to item 6. Item 5, which is our consent calendar. What we have before us our consent calendar for March 22nd, 2022. Do I have a motion?
I'll move to pass the consent calendar for March 15th, 2022.
Second.
Moved by Vice Chair Trieger, seconded by Commissioner Burney. The consent calendar for March 15, 2022. And I'll mention this to anybody who may be watching. If you click on View Material on today's agenda, it will give you the entire script of what we are passing today. Any discussion to the motion? I see none. I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously.
Well, did Commissioner Bozovich vote?
Commissioner Bozovich, are you, do I have an audio on you right now? Then without audio from Commissioner Bozovich, I will say that it passes 4-0 with Commissioner Bozovich muted or excused absent. Passes 4-0. Thank you, Commissioner Burney, for bringing that to my attention. And then we'll move along to item 5B, County Administration, 6B, excuse me, County Administration. Any announcements, Mr. Volker-Heiske?
Chair, I'd like to hold announcements so that we can invite Jocelyn Warren back. If you could possibly get through your items 7A and B by 11 o'clock, it'll give us about 15 minutes with Jocelyn Warren to talk about, that was my thought at least, unless you want to do the public health, continue the public health discussion now.
Yours is a good thought, Mr. Volker-Heiske. We'll move along and come back to you at around 11 o'clock. Then we'll move along to County Council. Mr. Dingle, any announcements?
Chair, no announcements, and I think I can get you that time back. I think you've all seen the new, or the board packet with the material in it. So I'll be very brief. I'm sure you've had a chance to review it. There are just a couple of things I think are important to highlight. And the first one is, if you look at page 2 of the document, you'll see that we've begun, you recall that last year we introduced a 4th E to the mission of the team, and that was to introduce equity. And you'll notice that I'm at the bottom of—
Pardon me, Mr. Dingle, I'll just mention that we did move directly into 7B, which is a report on the fatal crash investigation team. Mr. Dingle, please continue.
Sorry about that, Chair. You'll notice that we started collecting some data on factors that are related to that in terms of the gender, the age, the race, those sorts of things. I wanted to point that out. And I also wanted to point out that there's also a chart that shows the most dangerous roads in Lane County. And these are the places, these are the areas where we're focusing both as the FCIT and Public Works, trying to engineer some solutions to these. And then you can find that on the top of page 4. And finally, on page 5, there's the mention of the enforcement. I wanted to remind the board and the viewers that we did receive the 2nd designation of a safety corridor in the state of Oregon. The first one was in Marion County, and that we are actively, we have a subcommittee that's mandated by statute to manage that. We're trying to get more enforcement out there. We're talking about signage. Becky Taylor's done a great job talking with the residents out there, and it's not surprising. The one thing they want to do is they want to see the speed reduced. That's really all I have, unless you have a specific question, and I know that Becky's on this as well if you have one.
Thank you, Mr. Dingle. First I'll call on Ms. Taylor. Ms. Taylor, is there anything you wish to add?
Thank you, Chair Farr and Commissioners. I think Mr. Dingle has addressed all of the key points. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. I'd like to remind everybody that Ms. Taylor was named the Outstanding Public Employee for the entire county in, I believe, it was 2018. Thank you, Ms. Taylor. Commissioner Buck.
question on the London corridor is if we have received any data back from the monitoring yet.
Chair Farr, Commissioner Buck, I do not believe that we've received any data. At least I haven't been made aware of it. Becky, do you have a different answer?
We did see a reduction in excessive speeding since the signs went up about traffic violations doubling.
Well, that's something.
Excellent. I'm looking to the queue for further discussion. I see none. This is not an action item, Mr. Dingle. Is that a conclusion then of the report?
It is, Chair.
Thank you very much. Well, that is a rarity, but that came in about 50% of the time allocated. So excellent. Ms. Taylor, thank you for joining us today, Mr. Dingle. And we'll move directly along. Mr. Mokrahysky, I'll bring it back to you.
So, Chair, I think we're going to ask for you to reconvene the joint meeting of the Board of Health and the Board of Commissioners. There's no action being requested, but just so that it's clear that you're having this discussion as part of a public health update. And this is to, this is not, this item specifically is not on the agenda, but it was intended that we would provide you an update as part of that Board of Health discussion on this recent suicide cluster that we've seen at South Eugene High School and the coordination between the Oregon Health Authority and Lane County Public Health, along with the school district and the school in that work. So Dr. Warren is here to provide that update, Chair, and if you could reconvene the Board of Health and Board of Commissioners.
Thank you, Ms. Mokrahysky. I will do that. Prior to doing that, I'll mention that we recall that we do have a 11:15 executive session time certain. So with that, at the sound of my gavel, I will be recessing the Board of County Commissioners and reconvening as a joint meeting of the Board of County Commissioners and the Board of Health. We are in session as a Board of Health, Board of County Commissioners joint session. Dr. Warren.
Thank you, Chair Farr. I am pleased to be back with you. This is a much different topic, and I would like you to know that we went into incident command on Friday to respond to the recent cluster of suicides in our area. There have actually been 11 suicides in the past 5 months between with youth, and when we say youth with regard to suicide, that is under the age of 24. So roughly 11 over the past 5 months, and that is a higher number than is typically expected. So that is why it's considered a cluster. There is not, as at this time, any evidence of contagion, which would be that those are connected in some way. That does not appear to be the case. There is an ongoing investigation, and the Oregon Health Authority has deployed one of their suicide prevention experts from the state to the response as well, in support of Roger Brubaker, who is our suicide prevention coordinator, and Elizabeth Maxwell, who is the prevention supervisor. So they are staffing the incident command, and which allows them to focus all of their attention on this issue. That's the intent of assuming incident command, is other priorities are set aside in favor of this response. I think what Roger brings to this response that's really important is the emphasis on parent and community communication. He is very well versed in best practices associated with suicide postvention, which is what we call the intervention following suicides in a community. And he is working very closely with the 4J School District on plans for that response. We're also working with Lane County Behavioral Health with behavioral health support for the response to, in the person of Ellen Thornton Love, who is part of that team now for the time being. And it continues to evolve, and that group is continuing to work with the communities. I am happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Dr. Warren. And Ms. Gray, you're with us. Is there anything you'd like to add or to become a part of the conversation? I see not. I see no one in the queue. Dr. Warren, I noticed that our suicide prevention website became active just earlier this month. Roger Brubaker had sent us a message regarding that. Is that something that can be used in conjunction with this particular incident command effort?
Absolutely. That information on the website is available as a resource for anyone that is interested in that type of information and how they could better support both their community, but maybe individuals as well and other groups. A lot of that information has been shared with superintendents in an update that went out this week. And last week, we also sent a health alert to providers in the community to be looking for symptoms in order to be able to respond with their patients and clients.
Excellent. Well, that went live fairly publicly on March 7th, I believe is when that happened. So thank you for that. And we can all take a look at that. I see Commissioner Burney in the queue.
Thank you, Chair. Two questions. One, I'll just ask the question. Was the principal and school district at South Eugene High School responsive to incident command when there was trying to be interaction there at the beginning?
Yes, yes. And the incident command was stood up on Friday, and the 4J district was very responsive and has been working with Roger since then, and has also welcomed the support of the Oregon Health Authority.
Okay, well, that's inconsistent with what I heard. I'm glad to hear that. And my second question is, what exactly do you do? What does this mean? 4 young people have taken their lives, and all I've heard is incident command. What specifically happens?
What is part of the postvention response? Is that the question?
What's the response? What do you do? I don't know.
Oh, I see. Like, well, I can say that what you do really depends on what your role or position is. There are different responses for families and caregivers as opposed to school administrators or others in the community. Postvention is a science. So there are a suite of best practices that are available. A lot of that information is included on our website. There's a lot of support that can be provided. I think one of the things that Roger had, that I've learned from Roger that I think is really important is that it's important to talk about. Not talking about suicide can be very destructive and does not aid in healing. So I think that piece particularly is really important to convey to the community, that it is important to acknowledge and be able to talk about in order to foster the healing needed after suicide. If I could also mention, you may be familiar with the Why We Build. This is a really a wonderful exhibit that Roger Brubaker and community members have developed over the last a little over a year, which are actually the stories of suicide survivors. And I think that there is quite a lot that we can also learn from that as well when we're thinking about what an effective response can be, or why too. I think that there's, it is of course a very difficult subject. And I think that this exhibit really approaches it with deep compassion and also learning too, and what we can do to support people who may have feelings of suicide and suicidal behavior.
Thank you, Dr. Warren. Thank you, Commissioner Burney. Vice Chair Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Dr. Warren, for this presentation. A couple of questions. One, there's a cluster at South of 4 youth, but there have been 11 youth suicides so far this school year, but that is under age 24. And you mentioned working with 4J. So are we to assume that means that anyone under the age of 24 who is enrolled in Lane County Public School District, that it is 4J, all the middle or high schoolers are in 4J? So that's a yes, no question. And then regardless of the answer, these resources I assume are available to all school districts to help with both prevention and postvention. Is that right?
Absolutely. All of the materials were sent out to all of the superintendents across Lane County. And I'm sorry, just Commissioner Trieger, to understand your question, the 11 are not only at 4J. Those are 11 across Lane County. So that is not Eugene specific by any means.
Thank you. And as I understand it, this is even higher than our normal, which is higher than the national average. So this is a real public health issue that I know we've been really consumed with COVID response, but this is exactly the kind of thing that we need to get back to talking about as a Board of Health on a regular basis and understand what's happening in the community and what we are doing to respond, and focusing on the prevention side, as always with public health, is the best, is why public health is where public health shines rather than the postvention. So I appreciate you bringing this forward, and also know in our conversation in the health advisory, you shared that it is often on the recovery side of a broader community disaster or other challenge that we see a rise in suicide rates. So it's interesting the contrast that we had the celebration of sort of seeming to be the close of the pandemic moving into endemic, but with that comes some things not to be celebrated, which is that it's often a time of greater stress and challenge for folks who are at risk of suicide. And also that spring is a season in which we see higher suicide rates. Can you talk a little bit about those two pieces?
I am not an expert in suicide. I would be happy to bring Roger Brubaker back for an additional discussion of this. But yeah, there is certainly evidence of both heightened risk during spring as well as immediately post natural disasters and other emergencies. I can't speculate as to why that is. It could be that people who had thought that a lot of their kind of dark mood or depression was associated with specifically with an emergency or one event, find that once that emergency is resolved, that depression continues and is not resolved, and that may put people at higher risk. But yeah, I would be very happy to bring Roger back for a larger presentation. He is the expert in this for sure.
Thank you. That's perfect. And I'll just conclude by saying that's exactly where I was leading, was that I would like to think, again, now that we are moving out of such a crisis situation with COVID response and needing to appropriately spend as much time as we have been on that, that we can maybe start looking at calendaring out some of the higher priority public health issues in the community for our Board of Health to take up and get presentations and hear a report back. And I would be fully in favor of bumping this one to the top of the list and hear what we're learning in the communications with the district and with families in the community. Because to your point, talking about it is one of the most important things we can do to destigmatize it and open the conversation up for folks. So I think if we do that in public meeting and that we're all better educated as to how we can do that back to community, that will be part of the solution. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Vice Chair Trieger. Thank you again, Dr. Warren. Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. This is clearly horrific news. And I have to say, I didn't expect this coming, but it is really eye-opening to understand exactly what you were just talking about seasons where this occurs more often, or out of in this conclusion of one phase of the pandemic into another. But when we're talking about children, it's just heartbreaking, and we have to respond. And it just makes me even more supportive of trying to do something to get our crisis stabilization center open as soon as possible. I know there's lots of logistics behind it, but this is a place where we are going to be able to have beds for up to 12 youth, where anybody can, drop somebody there for care and hopefully, help them in a much needed environment of professionals in order to stabilize them before people resort and children resort to suicide. And so I hope we as a board will collectively move towards that stabilization center as fast as humanly possible, because we just have to save these lives. I don't want to see this happen any further.
Thank you, Commissioner Buck. I will have a few words to say, but first, Commissioner Bozovic.
Thank you, Chair. Having lost a friend to suicide, this topic's close to home also. I would ask Dr. Warren if maybe you could we've got a lot of public that watches our meetings, just a couple recommendations for what people can watch for and things they can do if they're concerned about somebody. I know our suicidepreventlane.org is the local suicide prevention website. There's resources there for people. But you know, if you could just, things people might want to listen for with their children, things they might want to, if they're concerned, and there's a national hotline people can call, but just what's out there for the general public, that can help them maybe navigate this, that might be listening to this meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner Bozovich. At risk of getting out of my depth, I am not a behavioral health specialist. I do believe that one of the things that's most prominently recommended is being open to discussing with your loved one, especially your child, and being available for communication or to listen to what it is they're needing. There is a national hotline for suicide prevention, and I am looking for that right now. I don't have it at right offhand right now, but that is available. It did go out in our materials out to the school districts as well as the providers locally with our HAN. So I'll try to pull that up while we're talking. I would encourage people to check the website. There's some really fantastic material available there for many different types of people that need to address us either in their families or with coworkers or others in the community.
Thank you, Dr. Warren. It's 800-273-8255. We'll give you the national number. I'm sorry, Commissioner Bozovich, I stepped on your toes there. I apologize.
Oh, not at all. Thank you, Chair.
I was going to give the same number.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Bozovich. And once again, Dr. Warren, Dr. Warren, you mentioned Roger Brubaker. He's been instrumental in reaching out and really, we have an unacceptable rate of suicide in Lane County. But, Lane County has been very proactive. 4 years ago, Willamette High School student, Chloe Wilson, took her own life. And I became personally involved in that because I knew her parents, Roxanne and Jason, quite well. And it was, and Roger and other members of Lane County reached out to Bethel School District at that point in time, Chris Parra, and prior to Chris, it was Colt Gill, who were the superintendents. And Lane County did a superb job at Willamette High School. So I have a great deal of confidence in your responsiveness as an incident command team, should the district be willing to accept the help and, and be active partnership. And I would expect that the 4J will be just the way Bethel was. My personal experience, the reason I say Bethel, that's where my personal experience was. But I believe, emergency steps have been taken by the county, and I'll look forward to seeing what materializes from that. After Chloe's suicide, a few things happened nationally. One is that students are now allowed to take a mental health day of absence from school. Now, COVID-19 has thrown all kinds of quirks into what active days at school are, but the nation is becoming more and more aware. And it seems, Dr. Warren, no matter how much we do, the causes continue to just fire hose at us. Sometimes it's bullying, and there are a number of different things that kids are bullied about. Depression comes in other phases, in other forms, but it's not a stationary target, is it?
Chair Farr, I think it's a very complex topic, and there are many causes especially at this time. I think we're all feeling a very heightened sense of stress and depression is much more common. I hope that we can, Roger often offers these classes called QPR, which are very effective for suicide prevention. That stands for question, persuade, and refer. And he offers these throughout the year to all community members. And these types of trainings really do give one the tools to be able to respond on an individual basis. And I think
they're not necessarily top of mind when suicide itself is not in the news or something that people are closely paying attention to. But as these as they come back and as we're offered again throughout the year, I will be sure to make certain that you as the board are aware of that and can also promote those in the community, because that really is one real strategic and concrete step that we can all take to be better prepared to meet this challenge in our daily lives.
And thank you, Dr. Warren. And we'll continue to look for updates. Any further, I'm sorry, Vice Chair Trieger, you physically raised your hand. I see it now in the queue.
Thank you, Chair. Just briefly, I meant to mention before I was a little unnerved, just the topic is unnerving. I wanted to state here in a public meeting that as much as possible when we get a report back from Mr. Brubaker, I would really like to see demographic data. There's also been a rash of racial harassment against Black high school students recently. And of course, nationally, there is a disturbing rising trend in public elected officials essentially bullying LGBTQ youth through anti-gay, anti-trans bills. And I have to imagine that there is an overlap in what we're seeing in youth mental health in our community that reflects the increased vitriolic conversations nationally around policies that impact specific communities. So I would very much like to see, as long as it isn't such small data that it could potentially out a family and make them identifiable. I would very much like to see those kinds of demographic overlays to this crisis that we're having in Lane County so that we can be as targeted as possible in our approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Dr. Warren, anything further?
I believe Commissioner Burney has a question.
I just popped up. Commissioner Burney.
I'm sorry, there's a lag. Thank you very much, Chair. Dr. Warren, it's amazing to me how sometimes history repeats itself. I was in the late 1970s, then the National Institute of Education and the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention funded a massive study around violence and vandalism in public high schools. And some of the indices, which was just terrible stuff, were rapes, murders, suicides, unruly behavior, bullying, et cetera, et cetera. In 78 and 79, I was one of a cadre of young people that were going to change the world. And we were evaluating what interventions actually worked. So I lived for 6 months in East St. Louis and South Chicago, identifying and that data and working on it. And so much of what is now I'm reading about occurring in schools, some of the dissension, this horrific tragedy that you're responding to here locally reminds me of that. So if I may, I'm going to try and dig up some of those things, because much of the interventions were very proactive. They were engaging students more in various activities that kept them involved. And this actually was a strategy against drug addiction and against things like suicide, this isolation and alienation, which I think COVID and our response to it has only increased. And I'm presuming we're going to see more and more of this, but it's just so sad to hear. And it brings back so many memories from, I don't know, what is that, 40 years ago.
Thank you, Commissioner Burney. And with that, at the sound of my gavel, I will adjourn this joint meeting of the Board of Health, Board of Lane County Commissioners, and reconvene as the Board of County Commissioners. Welcome back to the Board of County Commissioners. And we have an 11:15 executive session time certain. At this time, I will read us into executive session. This executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192.6602D, which allows the Board of Commissioners to meet in executive session for the purposes listed. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decision may be made in the executive session. We reserve the right to come back into public session should the need arise. If we do not come back into public session prior to the noon break, we will reconvene as the Board of County Commissioners at 1:30. At the sound of my gavel, we are in an executive session.